Coming up on today's episode of The Story Detective, I just watched a video where Cavanuagh was talking about George R.R. Martin's advice. Writers should start out writing short stories and write those short stories for a period of 5 years before they tackled a novel. She says to prove her wrong, and I'm not here to prove her wrong because that's a matter of opinion. And in my opinion, I don't agree with all of that, but I can tell you why writers say those things. And that's what's coming up. Stick around. I've heard it said, and maybe you have too, that if you can write one really credible paragraph, you have a building block for an entire novel. Learning to write in small chunks, what applies to that little piece of your story can often apply to everything, or almost everything, because I don't agree that you can learn to write a novel by writing short stories. The main reason there is a novel has a certain structural criteria. Short stories, yeah, they could have that same structural criteria, but they're often a handful of scenes, maybe just one scene or a part of a scene. They can fall anywhere on the structural spectrum, and that's fine, because a short story doesn't have to be anything more than one scene, one character, one reaction to something that's going on. So why do so many established writers, especially long-time writers, advise things like this? It's pretty simple. You've also heard things like, it takes 1 million words for you to become a writer, or 10,000 hours, I think they've broken it down to. And there's a certain degree of truth in that. Actually, there's a lot of truth in that. If you start writing today, it's going to take you a good few years before you get comfortable with yourself, your writing, your craft. There's definitely a learning curve. And if you're one of those people that say, well, forget all the rules, it still takes you a while to get beyond your own insecurities. For most of us. Does that apply to everybody? No. Some people can take to almost anything like a fish to water. Note the cliche. The writers aren't supposed to use. But aside from that, most of us have a bit of a learning curve. Diving right in for most people is not a good thing. And I think the whole self-publishing thing when Amazon first started, and we had over 2 million people, and most of them did not take to it like the proverbial fish to water. Most of them had to step back, reevaluate, start again, if they weren't totally discouraged. And therein lies the danger. You could essentially believe that you've done everything right, get out there, get your hopes and your dreams squashed, and never go back to it. Starting small, building up your confidence is the key that I think Martin is getting at. It's the key to what most writers who say things like this are getting at. It's the 1 million words, 10,000 hour rule put a different way. I also want to say don't discount those small magazines, especially if you're looking to publish traditionally. There are tons of tiny magazines out there, some that won't pay you in anything but copies, but they get inundated with everybody who thinks they have a short story to sell, just like everybody else. So if you're a pretty decent writer, you're getting comfortable with your craft, and even if they only pay you in copies, that's still a publishing credit. And if you get a few short stories out there, a handful of short stories is a long way to getting past that big first hurdle. Any publishing credit will get you past that first hurdle. And in the eyes of traditional publishers, the fact that somebody took a chance on you means a lot. If you got paid something or any notoriety for that story, even better. So it's a good way to break in. It's probably the best way to break in. I've recommended that to so many people. Should you do this for 5 years? I can't say that writing nothing but short stories for 5 years, I don't think anybody has the discipline to do that. I think if you have a novel in your head, you're going to start writing it. My best advice is don't get too attached to that first novel. Maybe not the first couple of novels. I would say my first couple were a practice run. The first one especially was a complete mess. The second one was better. And looking back, yeah, I think when I was working full-time in the whole business of comic books, I didn't get to write more than an hour and a half a day. So yeah, maybe the fact that I didn't write all that much and have hours and hours to put into the craft of writing probably is part of the reason. But I would say, yeah, about 3 years later, I started writing stuff that surprised me and things started getting more comfortable. If I were to look at that in terms of the 5-year rule, yes, it probably did take me a couple more years beyond that when things that I found difficult in writing a novel started saying, wow, I'm breezing through this. I actually know what I'm doing. And those things before that seemed like it was taking me time now seems pretty effortless. I'm not going to say it's all easy. There is a moment, a time when things click and an understanding comes. And that takes a little while. You can't really cheat that. There's no way to get ahead unless you're a prodigy. I would say what they're saying is don't expect miracles overnight. And yet, I think if you don't expect miracles, you're not going to get them. You have to believe in yourself. I had this conversation with Lisa Daly, and her story was the same as hundreds of other creators that I talked to. And that's the fact that you get your confidence built up. And that's what writing over time does for you. Because you will know in your brain, when you can see it on the page, when your writing is making those leaps and bounds. And when that confidence factor kicks in is usually when that serendipitous moment kicks in too, when you'll find yourself I can almost guarantee it, in the right place at the right time, and something is going to happen, and you'll call it luck. Luck has some part in it, I guess. I don't know that I technically believe in luck. I think it's getting your confidence up, your craft up, and you keep showing up. You keep hitting that until somebody sees that you have been at this a little while, that you've been persistent, because never discount that persistence. And then those doors will start to open. It's a process for everybody. It might take somebody 3 years, 5 years. It might take somebody 10 years. You can't really put a time limit on it because most of us don't have the same equal amount of time to write every day. And even if we did, it would be like training somebody in martial arts, any type of warrior, whether it's a warrior in writing or a warrior in martial arts. You can give the same 2 people, 12 people, 100 people, the same exact training. And there's going to be a few that stand out of the pack, that really leap ahead of the rest and do well really quick. And then there's others that's going to be somewhere in the middle. And then there's some other ones that's going to take longer. Everybody learns at a different rate. Know what's right for you. And understanding where the advice is coming from, I think helps to put it in perspective so these people don't seem like they're just spouting the same thing that everybody else does and trying to tell you what to do. No one can tell you what to do. You have to write what you want to write, but expect that you're going to get better. Expect that every day that you come to it, you're going to find something that you probably did wrong. You're going to fix that wrong. You're going to move on and you're going to get better. Every success is a series of mistakes, whether it's small mistakes, big mistakes, whether it takes 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I know professional novelists who wrote for 15 years before they broke in with their first one. It's a matter of practice, confidence, and a whole array of other things that you need to understand. Understanding does come, but it comes in stages. Nobody gets it all at once like The Force Awakens, and now I know everything immediately about writing, what I'm supposed to do, what I should be doing, and how to do it. That doesn't happen. So that's technically why. But if you want a novel from the start, you have to write what makes you happy. That's my best advice, and I hope you got something out of it. So until next time, keep those keyboards clacking, follow your passion, follow your gut. That's what I've always done.